last night. I tested it last night. Okay, great. It's working. It kept telling me I had to give permission. Night. I tested it last night. Okay, great. It's working. It kept telling me I had to give permission. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Poetry and Prose. Thank you so much for joining us today. I tested it last night. Okay, great. This is it kept telling me I had to give permission. Okay, I'm hearing a bit of feedback. Just 1 minute. Let's see if we can stop that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our May Author of the Month, and I am excited because I spearheaded this project, and we are going to have a lovely session. We're going to talk to Althea Romeo Mark, and then we will read some work of hers, and then she's going to read pieces from her newest publication. Althea was born in Antigua. She's an educator and writer who grew up in St. Thomas. She has lived and taught in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, Connecticut, and Ohio, Morvina, Liberia, West Africa, London, England, and Basel. She's in Switzerland now. That's where she's based. Her short stories, personal essays, and poems reflect her life experience and cultural influences inherited from her Caribbean roots. Althea has authored two full-length poetry collections, The Nakedness of New, and If Only the Dust Would Settle, and 4 chapbooks. So we are so pleased to have this award-winning poet with us today, and I look forward to just sitting and chatting with her and hearing her work. Althea, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you for inviting me.
So I would like to get into it. What can you tell us about your publishing journey? How did you choose your publishing path?
I would say my publishing journey chose me. I started as a student at the University of the Virgin Islands. When I started, it was College of the Virgin Islands, and years later, it became the University of the Virgin Islands. So I happened to enroll in the first Caribbean literature course that was offered then. I'm talking about back in 1970. And one of the assignments that Dr. Gashater, our professor at the time, gave us was to write a poem about what is a West Indian. So that was an assignment. He didn't ask us if we could write poetry. He says, go home and write a poem about what is a West Indian. And several of us came back with poems that he was very impressed with. And he asked us, those of us that, had you ever written poetry before? In my case, I had never written a poem before, but that was the start, that was the start of me writing poetry. And after he discovered these future poets in his class, he started a journal or magazine called VIP, Virgin Islands Poetry. And so many of us became regular contributors to that anthology. And so I was quite prolific. And so he got me a scholarship to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference in Vermont. And I didn't realize how big that was, until afterwards, because quite a few poets that it's like some kind of rite of passage that people go through. And so I guess that was the beginning of this journey. And then later on, he got poems written by myself and himself published in a magazine, a journal at Inter-American University in Puerto Rico. So Revista Review Interamericana. So our work were published in that journal from 74 until 77. And I left for grad school. I left for grad school I left for Kent State University for grad school. And there I was teaching in the Department of Pan-African Affairs. And there I was asked to teach a class in creative writing, or we called it a Black Writers Workshop. And out of that workshop came a collection of poems, of 50 poems. It was half and half. 50% of the poems were my work, and the other 50 were the work of my students. And while at Kent State University, I participated in different workshop groups. We did local readings in bars in the community. And then I started my doctoral program, and I had become a part of the Black Students Association at the time. And through that, I met a lot of African students, many of whom were from Liberia. And I decided, well, Ohio was too cold. I would like to go somewhere warm. So I dropped out of the doctoral program and I went to Liberia. And that was in December 1975. And I started teaching at the University of Liberia. I had my master's in American literature, and I started teaching at the University of Liberia in January 1976. And so while there, Dr. Gershater, who became my mentor, really, he was attached to a publishing co-op in New York, and he asked me to send some of my poems, said he'd like to publish a book of my poems. And so my first poetry collection, I should say a chapbook, it was less than 100 pages, but it was published in New York. So that was Palava. But then I was in Liberia. This was before the internet, This was before the internet. And if you wanted your work published, here I am in West Africa, where you had to communicate by writing letters. There was no internet. So you were more or less on your own. So in Liberia, I published 2 chapbooks while there. And I was very active in starting the Liberian Association of Writers. And so we did a lot of workshops as well. And we were lucky to have Maya Angelou come to Liberia twice to conduct workshops with us. We also got to talk to Nikki Giovanni by way of satellite. So this was arranged by the American Embassy, this interaction with Nikki Giovanni. And so at the end of 89, I went to my first West African writers conference, and that took place in Ghana. So that was my first writers conference outside of the workshop that we did with Nikki Giovanni. So that was quite a big thing. But then the Civil War started in 89, and it was quite a journey living in Liberia, because we had a military coup in 1980, and then an attempted military coup in 1985. We survived that. But then when the Civil War started in 89, we said, no, this is too much. So after 14 years of living in Liberia, well, my husband, who is from Grenada, had lived in Liberia a lot longer than I did, because he had an uncle who was a part of the Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement. And so he had a Grenadian uncle who lived in New York and who immigrated to Liberia in 1920 as a part of the Back to Africa movement. So that's how my husband got to Liberia. His uncle sent for like 5 of his nephews and educated them in Liberia, and sent some of them to Europe, where, they studied medicine and they got their professions through him. Anyway, so we left Liberia at the beginning of the Civil War, and we lived in London for 1 month. So I've had my refugee experience. So when I talk about the titles like The Nakedness of New, starting all over again in a new country, or The Other Long Connection, the other long anthology, If Only the Dust Would Settle, that is reference to the Civil War, because it went on for 14 years. So my life, although coming from the Caribbean, my life has been impacted very much by living in Liberia, West Africa, for quite a long time. So now living in Europe, we came to Switzerland because this is where my husband studied medicine. His uncle, who, as I said, immigrated in 1920, had sent several nephews. They educated them in Liberia at a Catholic school, and then one went to Ireland to study medicine. My husband came to Switzerland, and there was another nephew in Geneva. So that's how we came to Switzerland. So my husband came back to Switzerland after the Civil War. And so then I was really isolated from my connections, but I was able to send my work to the Caribbean Writer. And so I start sending my work out to the Caribbean Writer. And they, in turn, there was someone in Norway looking to put together a collection of Caribbean stories, or short stories, that they could translate into Norwegian. So that was how one of my first links in Europe, because my short story is among a collection of Caribbean short stories that were published in Norway. And while in Liberia, my work became a part of a collection that was published by a German publisher. It was a book about Liberia, but my short story and poems were included. So I really got my start first in Europe, and then by way of the Caribbean writer, got published in Norway, and then a former student of mine who later became professor of creative writing at the University of Pennsylvania, she introduced my name to an international poetry group, and I was invited to an international poetry festival in Medellin, Colombia. And there I met all of these poets from all over, there were 100 poets from all over the world who came to Medellin. And so I'm included in that anthology that was produced from this international festival in Medellin. And that was the 20th festival. So that had been going on for 20 years when I was invited. And from Medellin, I met all of these poets. And then I had an invitation for a poetry festival in Kenya. So I went with that. I went to that. Some of the poets that I had met in Medellin was also there. And they put out an anthology as well. And then I was invited to an international poetry festival in Romania. And they put out an anthology in Romanian and English. And so you keep meeting all of these international poets. And then I was asked to join the international poetry movement. And once I became connected to this organization, people invite you to contribute poems to their anthologies. So I've been invited to contribute to poems in Spain and in Italy and Portugal. And, so it grows. That's how it grows. Although I don't think I'm not that well known, perhaps outside of Antigua, but Jacqueline Bishop interviewed me did an interview with me in the Jamaican Observer, the Jamaican Sunday Observer. And then I got invitations to contribute my short stories on a regular basis to the Jamaican Sunday Observer. So I'm not a big fish, but I'm a small fish, swimming along nearby the big fishes. But I'm very grateful for all of these opportunities, that come up. And I never turn them down. I say, I always say yes to these opportunities when they come my way. So yeah, so that's how you start. The little fish start swimming, and slowly, yes, it has been a 50-year journey. And I guess living outside the Caribbean is a disadvantage in that way, but I I love writing poetry. I love writing short stories, and I would have been writing anyway, you know. So I just have this drive to write, and I send my work out, um, some to American anthologies, and yeah. So yeah, I get my poems published here and there in little journals, and they find their way on the internet. So, that is one way to grow as a writer. Yeah. My ambition is not to become this big famous writer, because for me it would be too stressful. It would be too stressful an experience, because I see my former student who has published a few books, and every week she has to fly here and fly there to give a presentation, or to be at this conference and that conference. It's not me. It's not me. I like uh my little space. I don't need to have that gigantic big space. Yeah. So that's me. Um
Thanks for sharing. What about
did I answer the other half of
you?
your question?
You
Yes, I
did.
think
You
I did.
did.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
That's one of the things I loved about your blog, was just seeing the variety of different publications that you've been in. What stood
Yeah.
out to me was seeing that the work was also published in China. Um,
Yeah.
I, yeah, I thought
In
that's I
Chinese,
have to speak to this lady.
translated into Chinese.
Okay, the book isn't available in.
It's
I
available
thought
in
it was a
Italy.
Chinese publisher.
No, it's an Italian publisher
Okay.
who had the work translated into Chinese by a Chinese poet. So
Oh,
yeah. So it's my work, the work of a Greek poet, and the Chinese poet himself, who is published by this
Italian.
Italian publisher. So
Nice.
yeah, it's a real mixture there. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was one of the reasons why I'm like, I have to reach out to this lady.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you were able to, chat with us. What's your process in terms of editing?
Um, I try to do, I'm not the best speller in the world, so I try to do as much editing as I can. And that's why I belong to a writers group, because I consider the writers group there are 10 of us, the other 9 pair of eyes who can look at my work, because often they see something that I missed. Because sometimes you are so close to your work, there
Mhm.
is a mistake. You keep reading it correctly, but you don't even notice that, you might have left an ed off of the verb, or you might have spelt something phonetically and not correctly. And so my writers group is important to me. So I cannot trust to write something and just send it off like that. I have to send it. If it's not my group, I would send it to someone in the group to have a look. I must have that peer review. It's very important to me. And being a part of a writers group, I've benefited greatly from that. And this is why in my new book, as a part of my acknowledgement, I I say that they are the wings on which I fly. They are the wings on which I fly. So
I discovered you on Facebook, and then I was
Okay.
led to your blog, which I think I spent a week just reading the
Yeah.
entirety of your blog. Um,
Mhm.
your social media, do you do all of that on your own, or did you seek outside
Yeah,
for social media?
I well, with the help of my younger, I have two daughters. The younger one, who does a lot of publishing herself. She has a doctorate in African history, so she writes a lot of papers and do a lot of publishing. So she's the one who set up the blog for
Mhm.
me. I think in 2009 when I joined Facebook for the first time. And I I don't blog every day. I do it once a month. Doing it every day would be too stressful. I don't make money for it. I just put, if I've published something, it's my way of putting it out into the world. And yeah, my way of sharing what I have done with the world. So that's what the blog do. I also take I also take a lot of photographs. And so sometimes I use photographs to share my experience. I'm not a professional photographer, but I think I have an eye for beautiful things. And it's because I'm a very visual person. So a lot of my poems are very visual because as I write, I see things. I do a lot of walking. I go walking along the rivers and brooks, and I see flowers and, you know, and so I take photos. So photography is part of my expression as well. So the photos I post every day or almost every day because it's a part of me expressing myself and the beauty I see that I want to share with the world, along with my writing along with my blog that I post once a month.
Well, I devoured your blog, just so you know. I just went all the way down. And
Yeah.
I really saw the blend of the Caribbean voice with
Mhm.
your worldly experience. How do you
Yeah.
mesh those things together? Because having a
Well,
Caribbean voice as a writer is very unique. It's a strong voice to have.
yeah, I guess born in Antigua and growing up in the Virgin Islands, I grew up with that Antiguan voice. There's also a St. Thomas voice, but that voice stays with you forever. It's a part of your grounding. The culture that you're born in stays with you forever. It never leaves you. So you carry it, you know, you carry it in your soul and in your spirit. And those voices are still in your head. The way people speak, it never goes away. It never goes away. So it becomes a part of you. And living in Liberia, I also have, well, the Caribbean is an African culture. And I mean, we believe in the same Jumbi business and all of these stories, mythological creatures that we have in the Caribbean. They're also in West Africa as well. So living in West Africa has further grounded me in, you know, in our folklore and all of these mythology that some of us think that they are real, very real. Um, I think when I was young, a lot of people thought that all of these things were very real. And I think these stories, my father was a storyteller, and all of these things left a very strong impression on me, you know. So I write about Switzerland as well. So that for me, yeah, that is a big problem for me. So I can't publish my Liberian stories and my Swiss stories in the Caribbean. So I have to find other, other means of getting those pieces published. Or I put them in my blog, that is the other alternative, is to put these stories in my blog.
Do you find it hard to separate the two voices, or do they just interchange within your work? Or when you sit down, you say, I'm going to write a Caribbean story, so you're working within that voice.
Yeah, my Caribbean voice is definitely separate from my Liberian voice, because certain expressions are different. Like a Liberian, for example, when they express sympathy, say, hey, yeah. So that's their way of expressing sympathy. I'm trying to think of how Caribbean people express sympathy, but that definitely, and they love to say "oh" at the end of sentence, at the end of sentences. A hungry "oh," you late "oh." So they have this "oh" at the end of sentences. So after living there for 14 years, that is, I think of myself as becoming an adult in Liberia, because I was 26 years old when I arrived in Liberia. I got married. My 3 children were born in Liberia. They're born to Caribbean parents, but they're also Liberian born. And so they like the Liberian dishes, which, Caribbean dishes are a variation of West African dishes as well. So, yeah, I consider myself growing up, becoming a woman. I became a woman I met my husband, became a mother of 3 children, evolved as a teacher at university. But of course, after I left Liberia, I had to start all over again. I couldn't speak German, so I had to start at the beginning. I couldn't teach at a university. I was a housewife for almost a year, and I had to go back to school. I had to go to school to learn German. And then I decided I wanted to teach again. So I went back to school to study teaching English as a foreign language, since my German was not good enough to teach on a higher level. So that's where I started again. And so I've been teaching English as a foreign language at different levels. You have beginner levels, and then you have intermediate levels where you can discuss English short stories. And then you have certificate levels where people who want to become English teachers, so you have different levels of teaching English as a foreign language. And so, so in one of my courses, I would teach English using reading news articles about what's happening today and taking out vocabulary, having discussions, or sometimes we discuss short stories, or you can choose a novel and read a chapter. And the students are of all ages. Most of them are adults, over 30. And they come to English classes because they love it and they want to learn English. So I've had students come to my classes for 10 years. the same students coming for 10
Wow.
years in a row
But I
because
love how
they're
I
talking
love
about short stories and reading news articles and discussing it. So they find that very exciting.
I love how everything you do somehow involves the written word. Our last
Yeah,
question, what
yeah.
advice would you have for, the young writer, someone that hasn't published yet?
Well, for me, it has been a very long road. I think um, it it's not an overnight thing. It's hard work, and you have to put in the work. You have to be able to take criticism. If someone makes suggestions about how, if you're in a group and several people make the same suggestions about something you should change or how to improve it, you take their advice. There's some people who say they want to be writers, but then they don't listen to anyone but themselves, and they think they know best. But the best way of learning to be a writer is to get feedback on your work and learn what works and what doesn't work. For maybe some people are born with a gift and they become an overnight success. For others, it's a long road where you are learning and improving. And I write a lot of short stories, but I have not. My next goal is to put out a collection of short stories. And some of these stories are over 30 years old, but I want to go over them and rewrite them and have them critiqued and, make sure they're perfect for an anthology. But so for me, everything takes years. I like my work to simmer,
Mm.
and I'm a perfectionist in that way. I like my work to simmer, but I admire the young writers who come out and are able to find success immediately. It's of course it's a different time. I started pre-internet, pre-internet. I started in 1970, so it has been a very long road, and you have to adapt. You have to adapt. You know,
Yes, you
you
do.
have to adapt yeah. If you can't adapt, then you will not make progress that way.
Okay. Well, thank
And
you
then
so
you have to be able to take rejection, because
Mhm.
most of your work get rejected, but you don't give up. You keep on going. You try to improve. Sometimes you look at a piece of work and you think it's perfect, and you take it to a workshop and then everyone tells you that it's rubbish, so you have to go back and look at it, you know honestly, and you can see where the pitfalls are. You
Mhm.
write and rewrite and you improve. So yeah, you have to stay with it if you love what you do.
Well, we love what you do. So thank you so much for sitting with us
Yeah, you're
and sharing your
welcome.
story and your writing journey. We are going to read your work, and
Okay.
please sit. And a lot of authors find it interesting to hear their work in someone else's voice.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I appreciate that very much.
thank you for being here, and I hope
You-
you enjoy our readings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into the part of our program where we are reading work. So authors, please, readers, please. I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves unless you're reading, and we will start with Vishnu. Vishnu will be reading for us today. Photo shoot, getting to know you, what the river steals. Vishnu, the floor is yours. Kindly unmute. Hi, Vishnu, you may have to unmute.
Right, I'm ready. Is that okay now? No? Yeah.
Okay, we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. So I'm going to read 3 poems from our author of the month. And the first one is called Photo Shoot. We stand on a stairway, our places dictated by height. We are not posing for Ellie or Ebony. My visit from afar to a cousin's house has guided us together, the offspring of a no longer fair granny. Granny is always a topic when we meet. In our words, our writing, we admire her brazenness, crave her boldness. We want her fighting spirit, not a fighter. We want to box with her words. So we pose, the carriers of her genes, walk down memory lane, talk about the island life shared with her. We take her stories with us, still alive, still kicking. So that's the first one. And the second one is called Getting to Know You. Pretty short one. You didn't tell me getting to know you would be peeling an onion. You didn't tell me that the slow stripping away of layers would cause so much tears. You didn't tell me discovering the real you would be disappointing, heartbreaking. You didn't tell me the core of you would be dark, rotten. And the third one is called When the River Steals. I do not speak of bodies stolen by the river gods, snugged from swirling vortexes, grabbed from capsized boats, or trapped in quicksand. Nor do I speak of branches, bits of broken bridges, driftwood, household furnishings, plastic bottles, the odds and ends collected after flood. I speak of things we see, but cannot hold. Things reflected by nature's spectrum of color, playthings of the gods of sky and water. The river is a thieving magician that steals the blues, oranges, yellows of the heavens, the rainbows of the sky, swipes the green of grass and trees, the white of gray stones, the brown of riverbacks, the yellow, red, purple, pink of flowers. Then in its swirling, rippling, magical mirror, it shares not a replication, but its interpretation of what it has run off with. It makes an abstraction that snares our eyes. We look on in wonder, bedazzled, enchanted by the river's stolen beauty. Thank you for allowing me to read. I enjoy reading them.
Thank you, Vishnu. Lovely reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reader would be Shahira, and she would be reading A Statue at the Gate.
Hello, everyone. This afternoon, I will be reading to you A Statue at the Gate. Let's begin. Mercedes Riley had lived in Waterloo, West Africa, for 5 years. She had always dreamt of living in West Africa, the home of her Caribbean ancestors, and was elated when her husband, Vincent Riley, had been posted to his first foreign appointment. The United Nations Development Program had assigned him to the College of Agriculture at the University of Waterloo. After 1 year in Waterloo, Mercedes had learned to have the fortitude and patience of Job. Standing 1 hour or more in line at the bank had ceased to send her to the precipice of madness. Going a whole day without electricity and water no longer gave her migraines. Driving in traffic, which sometimes seemed to follow no rules, had stopped giving her heartburn. She had learned to fit in quite well. In Miami, where they last lived, Mercedes had been too busy with teaching and the day-to-day running of her home to get involved in social activities. Waterloo being a small country, one's social position made a person easily recognizable and acceptable to the ruling class. As a Black woman, for the first time, she felt a sense of power. She felt confident. Mercedes did not have to work, and with the assistance of a nanny and a houseboy, she had a certain amount of freedom that she had not enjoyed before. She had her second child, Prose, in Waterloo, and was proud of her African-born son. On a Saturday afternoon, during the dry season, Mercedes had a meeting at 3 p.m. The International Women's Club was planning its annual cultural extravaganza. She had joined a few women from the Caribbean to showcase the island's culture. Mercedes' eldest child, Francia, was taking part along with her, and they were going to be fitted in their carnival costumes. Mercedes had already bundled 8-year-old Francia into her beige Honda Accord. Her nurse, Miata, who had tied Kwesi securely onto her body with her wrapper, was trying to quiet him down by dancing around the front yard. He had wanted to go along and was screeching loudly. Mercedes patted his head, kissed his wet cheeks, then slid behind the wheel of her car. "Never mind, honey," said Mercedes, puckering her lips. "Mommy will take you for a ride later." As Kwesi shrieked, Mercedes started up the engine and reversed the car out of the gate. Outside the gate, she parked and got out. As she pulled the iron gate to close it, she noticed a small wooden statue leaning against the whitewashed wall. It was the most hideous statue she had ever seen. It stopped her in her tracks. "What on earth?" muttered Mercedes. Fear took hold of her. She had seen ceremonial masks in museums and knew that their exaggerated appearances were part of their appeal. But this one outside her gate had a frightening personal significance. Her dark, slender hands became cold as she stood rooted in a small patch of dry grass. Its huge, bulging eyes stared at her, and its thick, exaggerated lips, which took up half the space on its face, mocked her. A round, swollen stomach hung over its barely observable feet. Francia, unaware of the presence of the statue, watched her mother, who stood rigidly, her 3-inch heels sinking slowly into the brown grass and light sandy dirt. "Mommy," she called out, "what's wrong?" Mercedes' brief spell was broken by Francia's voice. "Francia, look at this thing leaning against the wall," said Mercedes in a subdued voice. Francia leaned out of the car window. "What, Mom?" Mercedes stepped aside, allowing her daughter to get a full view of the wooden statue. "Wow, look at that. It's ugly, isn't it?" Francia burst out laughing. "Hush up," said Mercedes, annoyed. "There isn't anything funny about this. It is a statue used in rituals, and I'd like to know who put it there and why." Francia, feeling hurt, drew back inside the car and was silent. Miata, the nurse, seeing the car at a standstill, walked over to the gate to see what was going on. Baby Kwesi had stopped crying as he saw his mother was still around and began playing pony on Miata's back. "Take it easy, Kwesi," said Miata, rubbing him on his back to keep him quiet. "Something wrong, Ma?" She walked up to Mercedes. "I don't know," said Mercedes. "Come here. Look at that," she said, pointing at the statue. "Do you know anything about this?" "No, Ma," said Miata, putting her hand over her mouth and gasping loudly. "What kind of statue is it?" asked Mercedes, her body trembling slightly. "It's something we use for rites, something for fetish. Good things, bad things," said Miata, looking confounded. "Why would someone put it outside my gate?" asked Mercedes. "I don't know, Ma," said Miata. "You have to ask around and find out." "Okay," said Mercedes. "I'll find out." "Miata, go into the house with Kwesi and stay there. Do you hear me?" She had regretted giving Jibanyan, the houseboy, the afternoon off, as he would have been able to help her. "Yeah, Ma," said Miata, as she walked rapidly towards the garage door. "Mommy will see you later, Kwesi," said Mercedes, waving at her son. She closed the gate with her eyes on the statue and drove off rapidly, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The neighbors, walking along the roadside, cursed her loudly as dust stirred up by her car encircled them. As Mercedes drove, her knees shook uncontrollably. Her mind was occupied by the strange event. Is someone trying to harm me? She wondered. I am an educated person, and I am not supposed to believe in these things. But I have heard so many strange stories about Obia, witchcraft, and evil people who walk the world between the living and the dead, all related to her siblings by her father. Last week, they found a dragon in the neighborhood. The medicine man who was summoned said Mr. Kipoto, who lived in the house where the dragon was found, was a wizard and blamed him for the deaths of several children in the area. Mercedes had gone to see the dragon out of curiosity. A piece of cloth wrapped with assorted threads and beads and other strange fetishes. The people told her that the object turned into a dragon at night and sucked its victim's blood. She had laughed inwardly at the time and wondered how the local people could be so backward. The neighbors had given Mr. Kipoto, the local Bossa chief, a good thrashing. Everyone took turns beating him on his head and back with their fists. A woman whose child had died the week before had whipped him with an iron cord until she had no strength left. Mr. Kipoto was then taken away to jail. Mercedes had wanted to intervene, but did not want to get on the wrong side of her neighbors who followed strict traditional laws. The more these thoughts filled her head, the more she became concerned. Witchcraft was not new to her. She had been mesmerized by these stories, told by her parents and grandparents since a child. There were people who sacrificed their loved ones for riches, and women went to voodoo men for medicine to ensure their husband's faithfulness. Why am I thinking about this? Mercedes said aloud. I am getting myself worked up. What are you saying, Mommy? Asked Francia. Mercedes had forgotten that Francia was in the car. She looked ahead. Oh my God, she said loudly. What happened, Mommy? Asked Francia, shaking her mother's shoulder. Nothing, honey, replied Mercedes. I have long passed our destination. She pulled over to the side of the road and waited until traffic was clear and made a U-turn, her wheels screeching. Drivers passing by stared at her. She looked straight ahead and stepped on the gas. She reached the International Women's Club in 10 minutes and parked the car outside the gate, as the parking space inside the compound was filled. Inside the building, she passed by several people but did not pay them any attention. Mercedes! A voice shouted. She turned around. There was her friend, Daphne, one of the participants in the Caribbean pageant. She walked over to Daphne and greeted her with a kiss on each cheek. "Girl, you are really out of it today," Daphne whispered. Mercedes did not answer. She looked at her friend, but appeared to be lost in her own thoughts. "What has Riley done to you?" Daphne asked in jest. "I hope he hasn't been stepping out on you." No, it's not anything like that," Mercedes replied. Her voice sounded tired. "I'm not feeling well. I'm going to leave Francia here for the fitting. I'll go home and come back. Is that okay with you, Francia?" she asked, looking down at her lanky daughter. "Yes, Mom," Francia replied, eager to go and play with the other children. "Okay then, Daphne, I'll see you later." "Be sure to rest yourself well," Daphne shouted at Mercedes as she walked rapidly down a corridor. Mercedes got a quick glimpse of her sunken cheeks as she rushed by a mirror on the wall on her way to the door. "Lord, this chronic malaria killing me. Hope I will soon get my appetite back." Outside the building, she remembered her reason for rushing back home. Her heart raced. She was afraid for herself and her family. The more she thought about someone harming them, the faster she drove along the highway. She was driving 60 miles an hour in a 40-mile zone. After what seemed like a long 20-minute drive, Mercedes finally turned the corner onto the dusty road that led to her home. She stopped in front of the gate. The statue was still there, gaping at her with its bulging, sinister smile. She turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. Her heart thumped rapidly as she walked past the statue. She struggled to open the latch securing their gate. She never had difficulty opening it before. As she finally unlatched it, she heard a thud. The statue had fallen forward in front of her feet. "Oh God!" she cried out. Then she noticed a bird flying away from the statue. She ran into the house. "Miata," she called as she entered the kitchen. Miata, alarmed at the urgent sound of her voice, ran to the kitchen. "Is Kwesi okay?" Miata queried. She was panting. "Yes," said Miata, puzzled. "I've been playing with him in the bedroom. What's wrong?" "He doesn't have a fever, a cough, or diarrhea? No malaria?" "The babe fine, Ma. He's sleeping." "You okay?" Miata stared at Mercedes. "Why are you sweating so much? You're not looking well." "Oh, I am literally worried sick," said Mercedes, "but you won't understand." "Ma, go lie down," insisted Miata. "I won't lie down until I find out who put the statue in front of my gate," replied Mercedes, irritated. Oh, that, said Miata, laughing. It is not a laughing matter, said Mercedes, pacing the kitchen floor. Ma, no worry, said Miata, still laughing. It was Chuku, that boy from the university who come to visit Mr. Riley sometimes. Chuku? Shouted Mercedes. Chuku is here? She pulled up a chair from the kitchen table and dropped onto it. Yes, I am here, said Chuku, taking up the door frame as he walked into the kitchen. His tall, brown frame swayed as he walked toward Mercedes. I beg you, Chuku, pleaded Mercedes. Please explain why you left that statue at the gate. Oh, that, said Chuku, pulling out a chair from the kitchen table and laughing as he sat down. I was walking down the road leading to your house, and the two dogs came rushing at me. The statue was lying on the road, so I picked it up to toss it at them. Anyway, they had a change of mind. I kept it in my hand. When I came by earlier and knocked, nobody answered. So I rested the statue at the gate. That's all. I went to visit my friend, Flomo, who lives behind your house. Mercedes was too ashamed of herself to explain to Chuku the crazy ideas that had taken hold of her mind. You know something, Chuku? Said Mercedes. I think I have lived in Waiatelo too long. I am beginning to think like you all. I am going to book a long holiday in Miami. Really, Mistress Riley? Asked Chuku. I am to take that as a compliment or not? Take it whichever way you like, replied Mercedes, rising from her chair. I am going to pick up my daughter and start the rest of the day right. Mercedes walked out of the house. Outside the gate, she picked up the statue and took a good look at it. It did not look so ominous anymore. Gathering all her strength, she tossed it into the nearby bush. She entered her car feeling light as a feather. Driving slowly down the road, she greeted everyone cheerfully. I am going to book a flight to Miami tomorrow, she said quietly to herself. And that's it for me on today's episode of Poetry and Prose. I really hope you all enjoyed. I think you are muted.
Thank you, Shahira. Thank you so much for reading. I loved your dramatic reading of this piece. Mutilal says, always enjoy Shahira's reading. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This particular piece, at least for me, brought Erica Badu had said, most intellects do not believe in God, but they fear us all the same. So that's, for me, that's what that resonated. I know if Cassie was here, he would have had a lot to share about that part of folklore. We are actually, Cassie can't be here today, but he wanted to participate. So he put his readings on video. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so we can hear him read. Thank you so much, Shahira.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. It's a pleasant Sunday afternoon. I hope wherever you are. Fellow writers and poets, it's my pleasure to read poems from Althea Romeo Mark. I'll be reading 3 of them this afternoon. These poems have been published in the Caribbean Writer, Volume 36, 2022. The first poem is called Anyam Them Words. Anyam them devour every word in books of Caribbean stories, piled at my bedside in my European home. I wrap myself in tales about my people, revisit the magic of healing herbs and voodoo, obia, our hovering otherworld. And yam them words, they are breakfast, lunch, dinner. They ground my feet, nourish my soul, give me light when I am beaten down by dark winter. Keep me down, keep me warm when I am cold. And yam them words, chapter after chapter, all soused in the marrow of Caribbean customs. They offer starter, main course, dessert in my fantastical journey. Reading is my free passage to my distant home. There is no endless flying, no canceled flights, no interrogation by immigration. I hear my people's voices, walk with them in markets, ride with them on calypso bombarded buses, hear the sucking of teeth, the measured sound of our annoyance, stretching in its elasticity, hear the unrestrained, infectious belly laughs that grab our hearts and are slow to depart from memory. I hear the screams of souls who fear losing themselves when ensnared by jobless Sukana, Mami Water, and by jumbies that refuse to depart the living world. I see how we speak without speaking, arms akimbo, eye cutting, eyebrows moving, our lips and noses pointing, and yam them all protein-filled stories that are food words for my soul. The second poem by Althea Romeo Mark is entitled Dear Ancestors, Memoranda Between Worlds. Our forebears brought them from West African shores. The unwritten codes of conduct, the secrets to longevity, pacts kept between the living and long-gone ancestors. They passed them down to us. Herb-filled lockets placed around a newborn's neck wards off the jealous dead. White sand spread around homes keep the recently departed at bay when they come by to say farewell, sing their lamentations. The broomstick turned up in a corner says, dear friend, dead friend, fiend, your time is done here. We do not care for unannounced visits. The broomstick is turned up for the living to halt unwelcomed road warriors peddling wares and religion. We have now shunned the public shaming of bedwetters, once forced to march down village roads with clanging cans tied to their feet. But we thank you, dear elders, for the healing herbs and bushes that mend the broken bones and spirits, that minister to maladies which test our will to live. You left us many proverbs, The death of whelks is the joy of soldier crab. When it rains, monkeys say that they should have built a house. Moon runs fast, but they catch him. One hand can't clap. Your memoranda imbibe the harmful, noted, discarded. We will never close the door between the realms of the living and the departed. Your ancient wisdom still lights our path. Final poem, which I will read this afternoon, is entitled We Do Not Live and Learn. How forgiving is Magna Mater. She carries in her heart millenniums of disappointment in mankind. Who said we are more important than the ant? Who said we can live without rain, rivers, and trees that sustain us? They are our brothers and sisters in nature, brought forth by our Creator. We destroy the air we breathe, poison the land that feeds us, pollute the river and the sea that provides us with water. We cast aspersions on our Maker, the mother of mothers and the fathers. We are responsible for our own demise. We do not live and learn. Thank you very much, sisters and brothers, for listening in this afternoon, and may all be well with you. Thank you.
That was Cassie's share. I was so pleased that he wanted to partake, that he was willing to tape record his share. We're going to move on now to Darren.
Hi,
Darren.
shall I read all three?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Darren will be reading a poem for mentors, Exhonorable Age, and Buried in a Bunker. And we have Exhonorable Age twice on the program because we wanted to see how it sounded in different voices. So thank you for reading.
Thanks. A poem for mentors. You point the way, allow us to uncover the secrets within and around us. You help us to form new understandings that break the perimeters of our perception. You teach without teaching. You teach without preaching. Oversee the birthing of who we are. Inexorable age. Despite open windows and doors, the bedroom reeks of camphor balls and rubbing oils. The stuffiness of hoarded things, treasured memories crammed in suitcases, stored under a bed, on the top of closets. Smells linger in plastered walls and wood grains, permeate clothes and rugs. The fight against these signs of aging is constant when one's mate cannot see them and is the perpetrator. The rays of youth, sucked in during a walk in the woods, after partaking in city life, are strangled in the house's hallway. My companion and I return to this replica of grandmother's house. This part of her memory I would like to keep at bay, postpone if I could, but it has begun to cling to my skin. Buried in a bunker. My mother's arms are not enough when bombs thunder and lightning missiles strike from drones above. My father's hugs are not enough when blasted buildings rain upon the ground. My world lies in rubble. Souvenirs of war cover the streets of my present. Memory is shrapnel pierced. Love is not enough to drag me out of this bunker.
Thank you for reading, especially the last piece with everything going on in the world today in Ukraine. It's really resonates. You wanted to make a comment?
No, I just wondered, does one have to say the week before that you are willing to read or want to read, or do
Sure.
you?
We typically send out when we talk about who's going to be the author of the month, persons would reach out and offer to read.
Okay.
So a lot of times everyone is really anxious to read.
Yeah.
We have Cynthia today who couldn't be here, but she wanted to read. So she would typically meet with them prior to the show, and we would tape record if you can't read, if you can't be here. But, so
Yeah. Because I always have pieces, but I didn't know how to. Was there a list, or whether I should talk to you before, or?
Yeah, we can certainly talk before. We could talk after, and I can fill you in a little more on how to go about it.
Okay.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah.
Cynthia will also be reading. However, like Cassie, she couldn't make it. So we did a video. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Is everyone hearing okay? Did you hear Cassie okay?
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
I've been privileged to read two of Althea Romero Marks' poems. And the first one is Noonday Gathering. They have been seated at their table in the church's annex since 11:45. Peter and Frau Fischer, Hans Rudy and Luigi, Herr and Frau Yilmaz. Rosemary's seat is empty and Max has not come. Hope he doesn't cross the great divide, Hans Rudy says. Rosemary abandoned us 3 days ago. Blonde, dreadlocked Peter sits at the table's end and stares at black letters sprinting on an upside-down newspaper. Near him, Frau Fischer, gray hair scooped back in a French roll, is nearly 70. Dressed in purple, she is bejeweled in silver elephants. Frau Fischer, placed next to widower Hans Rudy, follows his knobby fingers massaging gray stubble. He frowns at his interpretation of news he devours in a tabloid he swears he never buys. Today he spills his thoughts on the diplomat's fall, dessert before dessert. Luigi, opposite Peter, never speaks, but twiddles thumbs and twitches. His brain, having a tantrum, signals some demand. A great love of wine has spawned a natural rouge on Vreni Yilmaz's cheeks. Yusuf Yilmaz eats a meatless lunch as they're serving pork today. He flirts with Vreni, shuts out the local dialect. He barely understands. The gathered savor the meal, their 5 francs by, chatter in the comfort of familiarity, shove away the smell of dingy bedsits and the pain of life's pummeling. Peter spoons and slurps the last of his egg soup, sneaks wheat bread slices, sugar cubes, and napkins into big pockets. Frau Fischer bids farewell to her dispersing family of friends. She will stay behind to clean and fill the need to be needed. The next poem is Inexorable Age. Despite open windows and doors, the bedroom reeks of camphor balls and rubbing oils, the stuffiness of hoarded things, treasured memories crammed in suitcases, stored under beds, on the top of closets. Smells linger in plastered walls, and wood grains permeate clothes and rugs. The fight against these signs of aging is constant when one's mate cannot see them and is the perpetrator. The rays of youth sucked in during a walk in the woods, after partaking in city life, are sprangled in the house's hallway. My companion and I returned to this replica of grandmother's house. This part of a memory I would like to keep at bay, postpone if I could, but it has begun to cling to my skin. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, everyone. I wanted to hear the two pieces to see how it would work for each individual reader. Especially those two pieces I found were really layered. The first one especially, it told so much just about the different characters and the blending of different people in one piece. It was nice. I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed Cynthia's voice with it. We are going to move on now to, I believe, myself. I am up. Forgive the background noise. I think they're doing construction on my road. So if you hear banging in the background, it's been like that since this morning. Neighbors Sanderson. A warm summer night, windows flung open, are dressed in curtains of light. Old Mr. Sanderson, across the way, kneads his wife's plump arms, rubs her hands and swollen feet. The scent of eucalyptus wafting into the air subdues the smells of frying oils and salsa and settles in our noses. The fragrant ointment glistens on Mrs. Sanderson's thick, veined hands and fleshy fudge brown arms, her face tense with the hurdles of aging slackens. Evening ritual done, Mr. Sanderson nestles next to her and reads from a well-read book she had dedicated to him and made famous long ago. It is then we shut out distractions, hush those in mid-sentences, strain our ears to hear elegiac words that speak and sing for a voice now stilled by stroke. In baritone, Mr. Sanderson reads about seductive flesh and love in spring shifting into summer. There is no autumn or winter. It is a love superior. My second piece that I'm privileged to read, Behind Memory's Wall. There are things we bury deep in crevices, pretend they don't exist, until we confess our deeds, make amends, our sleep is held hostage. There are things that simmer below surfaces, ready to flare at the minutest of irritations. Scarred memories takes us back, though we have asked forgiveness and have been forgiven. Tabula rasa is no more. And my last piece that I am privileged to read, Wretchedly New. The TV blares its constant dazzle, and my hypnotized gaze burn my eyes red. My head, a throbbing, swelling, sinks to my shoulder blades, imprisoned in constantly updated news of floods, quakes, hurricanes, of war, death, and political orchestrations. I cannot turn away. The newscaster's voice in the metal box is comforting, familiar, mother tongue. Outside, an unfamiliar, barely explored world nips at my heels, tepidly traversed. It circles me, smells my fare. And these three pieces by Miss Romeo Mark, I absolutely loved, especially the first piece about the Sandersons, because it's really, when I was a teenager, I volunteered at a nursing home, and there was this wife that used to visit her husband that had a stroke, and he couldn't talk, he couldn't move, and she would bring him dinner every single night. Sunday to Sunday, she brought him dinner. And, you know, it just reminded me of that and that type of love. Because even at that young age, I admired that she would be so dedicated. And she used to get upset if he got fed before she arrived. She would get upset. He had to eat her dinner. And so thank you so much for allowing me to read. I could go into each piece, but I won't. For now, we are going to move ahead and listen to the woman of the hour herself, Althea Mock Romeo. Sorry.
Okay.
Althea Mark on the thing for some reason. Your name. So thank you.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
let's read.
thank you.
We hope we
I'm
did
going
you.
to read a few poems from my new collection, and it's dedicated to the whole refugee experience or the whole immigrant experience. And they're from my book On the Borders of Belonging. My whole life experience, I've been an immigrant, born in Antigua and moving to the US Virgin Islands, and there non-US Virgin Islanders were referred to as aliens or garrets, or, you know, they were looked down upon because they were the latest group working on the roadside, working as maids in hotels, working working in people's houses. And so they did all the dirty work. And then I immigrated to Liberia, where I had to immerse myself in a new culture. And once in Liberia, there was a war in Lebanon, and there were a lot of Lebanese people coming into Liberia. And so there was a time where all new people were treated as suspects, or anyway, foreigners were making the local people feel threatened, as is the case for all immigrants who are coming in. And again, after the civil war in Liberia, we had to seek refuge in London and declare ourselves as refugees. Oh. Let's see what happened.
We're still seeing you and hearing
Okay.
you.
Yeah. I thought our time had run out. So anyway, I'll just read one poem so that we don't run out of time.
No, we have more than enough time if you'd like. We have about
okay.
20 minutes left.
Okay. I'll start with a poem called What Poseidon Tosses Up. Poseidon is angry. His long flowing beard, like tentacles of seaweed, floats and rolls the moment he turns and tosses. The earth shudders. He hurls up what's foreign to his domain, the indigestible, unpalatable, ancient shipwrecks in his seabed, age-old bones of slaves dumped during transatlantic journeys, victims of cutthroat piracy, seafarers swallowed in storms. On a day when Poseidon splashes too strongly, tidal waves rush to shore. Schools of fish drift off paths. Whales are stranded. Jellyfish, broken corals, dead fish, and the recently drowned are heaved onto beaches. Today, Poseidon spat out another dead child, a child washed up like driftwood, one whose parents sought a haven. This story is the headline of papers selling the helplessness of the unwanted. The news, the spoiler of meals, and the birth of sinking, what can we do feelings about the tales of today's lepers. Our new day untouchables, those not trapped in colonies of tents, those who have sold all but their souls. They are sent off in decrepit dinghies by traffickers and caught in Poseidon's choleric rage. He is a god. What does he care about mere mortals? The drowned child washed to shore. In the end of a daredevil journey, the end of a ride on the waves of hope and fear. So this is dedicated to all the refugees who have lost their lives trying to get to other countries in these dinghies and small boats. Getting into these dinghies knowing that they're putting their lives at risk, and they somehow think that it's worth it despite the horrible stories that they hear. The next poem I'm going to read, it's called Crossing Frontiers. I remember the first time we came to Switzerland at the immigration, the comment that the immigration officer made, so many of you are coming, so anyway, the poem is titled Crossing Frontiers. The faces within bulletproof cubicles wear emotionless mask. Greetings are brisk. Bureaucrats are robotic, ready with drilling questions, name, country, reason for visit. They will listen to the stories of the nobodies on slow moving lines from a land without rain and a country where the rich owns everything except some souls, and a family from a place where clan is killing clan to assert domination, and people born into wrong religions, butchered and burned, and mothers, daughters, and sisters living low down in human hierarchy, mere beast to many, forced into servitude. Islanders from places where the sea has reclaimed the land, the helpless fleeing volcanoes, awake after years of sleep, the homeless escaping the destructive marriage of deadly wind and rain. The well-secured listen, duty demands it. They have been anointed to lord over others, decide the fate of brothers and sisters of different shades of skin, different nationalities and culture. Do the stories fall on deaf ears? Are the nobodies' voices just a droning sound, the white noise of routine? And camp, refugees coming into the countries are housed into temporary houses until permanent quarters are found for them. So this one is called camp. They are thrown together in a quarter where yesterday's news headline, refugee flung from a window, still hangs in the air like a stench. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do. Their faith in the hands of authorities. They wait, hang out at the neighborhood park like autumn leaves gathered by the wind. They read menacing messages in the skulls of passers-by. Some circle around, mark the territory with threads of footprints, count down days to the refugees' departure. Their neighbors haven't heard yet what they have been told. This refugee housing is now official. The haters of foreigners will flee this neighborhood as if it was an infested place. And I'll read one more. And okay, and this is a personal poem, and so I'll leave it at that. Again, it's a poem called Nyam. So I was born in Antigua, so Nyam is one of our vocabulary. It means to eat. Once again, I was a child who alone at a table had been told not to leave until I had cleaned my plate. My soul cried, stomach churned, but only I could consume new words in German and Swiss German, bitter on my tongue. New languages like hated spinach and Brussels sprouts would make me strong, everyone said. And crawling time witnessed me shuddering, witness the clearing of the challenge-filled plate. I have learned that new languages, like hated vegetables, are good for me, are essential to stability, are the stepping stones in seeking a secure place within a new society. So one must eat new words in order to move on and move on to the next level. So we're always learning and evolving in our space in this world. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, especially the first piece. I remember the child because it made international news. And it reminds me of the women that's coming across now to Trinidad from Venezuela. They're vulnerable to be trafficked. And, you know, to think that you would put yourself in that situation. It must be a desperate situation that you're leaving to think that, okay, I'm going to go do this. And it's a dangerous, because they come across in small boats as well. It's dangerous to make the travel. And then when I get there, am I going to be safe or am I going to be trafficked or, you know? So thank you for sharing.
So these people are willing to, you know, they pay so much money to take this risk and they don't know whether they're going to survive or not, but they're willing to take, you know, these chances and they keep coming and coming. And it's a very sad story.
The same in Germany. We see them. Lots of prostitution, lots of shops. It's terrible.
It is very sad.
As writers, I think at least for me, I mirror my world. So it's nice to be able to read it and feel like, okay, we are still telling the stories of those that can't tell it for themselves. Or, you know, we're still showing what the world is. And right now. All right, for this.
Still in the present, yes. And still we start wars, you know. Now in Sudan, it's happening all over again. And we're not learning anything.
If anyone wants to jump in, Krishna, I'm seeing you like raising your hand.
Yes, I'd like to jump in. Thanks. Thanks, Gersha, for the opportunity. One, I'd like to congratulate the author, Althea, on being honored in this forum, Poetry and Prose. You have found another avenue, another way of making yourself international. I see you as a very international writer. From the detailed response you gave to Gersha's significant prompts. Gersha, I congratulate you too on your carefully chosen questions for the interview, the publishing journey, which started it up, and we got a lot of details on that. The process.
So it's a long journey.
Yes,
54 years.
Right.
In the making.
The process of the editing, the workshopping, the social media part, the voice, the blending of your different voices, and the advice to unpublished young writers. Gersha, I enjoyed how you structured the interview, and Miss, I appreciated how you responded to Lucia's questions. And the third thing I'd just like to say is I enjoy your reading of your own work. Not many people can read their own work. I want to say, you know how to read your work, the rhythm, the cadence, the enunciation came across very well. And I have to say your later poetry, which is what you read, as opposed to what others read, I found a significant to me, listening to what went before and what you read, a significant development in your use of imagery and in your use of the line, the rhythm. I noted that. So
Thank you.
I want to congratulate you again. And Risha, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to jump in.
No, thank you. Does anyone else have a comment or a question for the author?
I have a question to the author. I just wondered, because it's so hard, I know, I've been writing poetry since I was 7 and prose, and I just wondered if you do manage to make some income from it, or because one is always going to festivals and reading, but one doesn't often get paid for all these trips and things that one does. So I just wondered, has it worked for you or?
No.
No.
No, I've worked as a teacher full-time, and I don't do it for money.
Yeah.
I do it because I enjoy writing and sharing my work. So since I work full-time first I was a lecturer at the University of Liberia. The last 30 years I've been teaching English as a foreign language. As a full, I had to support myself and my family, having to start all over from scratch again in 1990. So I don't write to make money. I just write because I love it and to share my work with others.
Yeah,
if you're young and single and don't have a family, you can aim at, writing to make money. And some people are lucky with their first novel, they produce a big seller and then maybe they don't have to work for a living, but yeah.
I don't know many of those. Yes, I know a lot of struggling writers too. And there are a lot of us here in Munich. It's full of foreign people who write and just read their work in bookstores and at festivals. And I'm one of them. I read a lot. I kind of open things. But and on Zoom now, fortunately there's Zoom, so I don't have to run around. I can just sit and do it from the comfort of my own home, which is very nice.
Yeah.
I wrote a poem.
Thank God for Zoom.
Yes, especially during COVID, it was such a helpful.
Oh yes,
thing, you had a social life, and were able to participate in even more groups all over the world. Of people from all over, as this one, and so it's excellent. I find to get looking into it's a window to different parts of the world and how other people. I have Romanian friends who've written books and other people who are writing books. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I wrote a poem once that stated, "I write because I breathe." And that is so true. Even if I never get paid, I will always write because it's the way my brain functions. If I don't write for a long period of time, I feel it. It feels like people that go to AA meetings. or see a therapist. I definitely need it. It's a form of medication. It's a therapy for me. And so, yes, and Cynthia, who couldn't make it today, she's at a local pop-up selling her book
Mhm.
today. So that's why she couldn't be here.
Oh, that's
So
good.
there are, and what I've found from interviewing different authors and from having these sessions, a big part of it is putting on that marketing hat.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
had one author that came on and he hired a publicist and he hired a social media manager
Yeah.
to manage his accounts.
Mhm.
So, you know, he's always doing different festivals. He's always doing interviews.
Yeah.
So it really takes that business mindset to
Yeah.
step out the
Yeah.
artistic zone and into the business zone when you're ready to really push your work. But I do believe that the work that we see here, even if persons, because who's to say what is successful and what is not successful? The work itself is good. Because there are some books that we have ongoing Reddit threads and arguments about why are they successful. So it's like, why
Yeah.
is work good? And the work that I read today from you is spectacular. I
Thank you.
really sat and read through your entire blog again and again, and I enjoyed it immensely. I loved the
Okay.
way the work was layered, the structure. That's why I asked about the editing, because you can tell that it's work that, you know, it's been crafted. But I saw Frank was on. Frank, do you want to jump in for our last comment?
I've enjoyed the whole process, and according to Krishna, it was very well done. And I enjoyed listening to your experiences from around the world. There's nothing like learning. You can't learn things from a book with the experiences you've had, and it shows in your writing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, I would love to continue the session, and perhaps if persons want to stay on, they can. However, we have come to a close. Our next session will take place 2 weeks from now. I believe it's supposed to be
20.
it is Indian arrival in Trinidad. Let's see. That we celebrate, for those of us that are not Trinidadian, Indian Arrival Day. It was the day indentured laborers entered the country here. So we recognize that. And the next session will be the 21st of May.
The 21st
of May, the 21st.
of May.
So not this Sunday, the following Sunday. So we
Okay.
do hope you would join us. And
Yes.
Yes.
So
Lovely.
the link is always the same.
the link is always the same.
Okay.
And the time is always the same too, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. on a Sunday.
I'd like to mention something that I've heard on other Zoom sessions. Zoom has this show captions at the bottom of the page now, which is a new thing, but we should turn it off because it only means that everything anyone writes there can be seen anywhere Zoom chooses. It stays on forever. So if people put their address or phone number, whatever, it's private, and the show, if it comes up as a caption, we should turn it off when you start the meeting. If you don't, because I think we don't want any of our comments to be public worldwide. It's nice in the group, but which in the chat. But I think I've been on other groups now, big groups, where they've learned this and they said, no, we'll turn it off because nobody wants everything they say to be viewable on every form of
Forever.
media. Yeah.
So true. Thank you, Palma. I'll look into that. Are the captions on now?
Yes, it says show captions. So if that appears, you as the organizer can turn it off. We cannot. But you just click on it to turn it off before the meeting starts or before we're all. Yeah, like now it's gone. So then
lovely.
Can't do it. Yeah.
I will certainly do that in the future. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah, it's been said on many groups I've been on. So yeah.
Okay. Well, lovely. We will
Thank you
close
for having me.
Thank
And yeah,
you for
please send
coming.
me an invitation.
We will do, and thank you for coming. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone that
you're
has
welcome.
read. And Althea, certainly we would love to have you join us again. Thank you.
Okay.
And with that, we'll
Okay.
close the meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
You
thank
said
you.